Soulful Valley Podcast is proudly sponsored by Evolution Sound Radio, where positive vibes meet soulful music, inspiring conversations, and conscious living. Whether you're seeking uplifting music, mindfulness, spiritual inspiration, or incredible podcasts just like this one, Evolution Sound Radio is broadcasting around the world 24 hours a day. Simply visit www.evolutionsoundradio.com. Click listen live or search for Evolution Sound Radio on your favorite internet radio app. Evolution Sound Radio, your soundtrack for inspiration, connection, and awakening.
Welcome to the Soulful Valley Podcast, the sanctuary for soul-led entrepreneurs, creatives, and changemakers ready to rise. I'm your host, Carey, best-selling author, book collaboration mentor, publisher, and energy alchemist, here to help you tune into your truth, amplify your voice, and align with the frequency of miracles. Each week, we dive into soulful conversations, transformational journeys, and the energies that shape our lives and businesses. It's time to evolve on purpose, because the world needs your light, your words, your legacy. Let's begin. Are you ready to share your words with the world? Applications are now open for 3 new books for our international best-selling Soulful Poems book series. We're looking for poets for Soulful Poems 6, Wisdom of the Soul, Soulful Poems 7, Messages from Spirit, and Soulful Poems 8, Manifesting Miracles, The Poetic Way. We're also looking for the final authors for our next transformational collaboration, Evolving on Purpose Volume 3, Angels, Spirit Guides, and the Frequency of Miracles. This book is almost complete, so that doorway is closing soon. Inside Soulful Valley, we don't just publish books, we amplify voices, build ripple effects, and create spaces where intuitive writers, poets, and visionaries are seen and heard worldwide. If your soul is calling you forwards, come and explore the current opportunities. You'll find the links in the show notes. And before you go, have you watched Zero Limits on Amazon Prime yet? If you have, we would love your thoughts. A short review on our IMDb or Amazon makes a powerful difference, and if you read any of our books, leaving a review on Amazon helps more readers discover these voices and keeps the ripple expanding. Your words matter, your support matters, and perhaps your next chapter is waiting. If you don't already, it's time to start, 'cause nothing's gonna work out until you do. Pen Densham's creative journey spans decades and disciplines. His lifelong love of image making was sparked early thanks to his father, a cameraman who produced short films for British theatres. By age 4, Pen was already appearing in his father's productions, even riding a live alligator in one. Pen's love of nature comes from growing up in England's wild New Forest. After moving to Canada, the first drama that he wrote and directed was described as the best film of any length shown on television in Canada. Densham was shepherded to Hollywood by Norman Jewison, where he has directed 4 theatrical features, and with his company, Trilogy Entertainment Group, he has been a producer on multiple other features, from Backdraft to Harriet. He executive produced nearly 300 hours of television, including personally reviving The Outer Limits and The Twilight Zone to network runs, because he was passionate about their unique storytelling. A constant creative explorer, he has dedicated himself to breaking new ground and his impressionist nature images. Pen also tries to inspire other artists with his books on screenwriting and creativity. You can find out more about Pen at his website on pendenshamphotography.com. The link will be in the show notes. Hello, and welcome to the Soulful Valley Podcast, Pen.
Thank you. Nice to be with you, Katie.
And you too. Pen, for our listeners who don't know who you are, could you just give us a brief overview of who you are and what you're doing in the world?
My impish brain wants to go, I don't know who I am either. You know? But I keep thinking I get close to knowing. My folks made short films when I was a little kid. They both of them were in the film industry. My dad was an identical twin, and his brother also was a film person. But I don't think they have much money, and they were trying to make short films, and they took me along with them. So I don't think they could afford babysitters. And they were making movies that went into the theaters with films like African Queen. And I watched as they put a camera up, and suddenly all the crowds come to see what the camera's doing. And they also took me with them to Water Street when they were showing their movies to the distributors. And I'm a little kid watching these giant images on a screen and just being blown away. And they even let me, or I'm not sure if they forced me, I don't think they forced me, to ride an alligator, a 7-foot long female alligator, in one of the films they made about people that kept strange pets.
Wow.
And there was something magical, something enchanted about cameras and storytelling that affected me from that age. And I knew I desperately wanted to be in a place to try and cast spells. Never thinking that I could. Being in England, one didn't get a lot of mentors that were creative entrepreneurs, people that took off and did things on their own. Most people ended up getting jobs that the school system wanted you to get because they were helping you to find a future. And or recruit you into the army was one of the things they were trying to do with me. Because there you go, you'll have all these skills and things, and you get a pension after so many years. I just want to cast spells. So I walked around with a camera all the time, and I had a very difficult life because my mother died when I was 8, and my father married a very difficult and damaged woman who was sort of like the cuckoo that tried to throw all the eggs out of the eggs out of the nest. So I was put in an orphanage for a while, as was my sister and brother, and told I was the big I am and stop being such an egomaniac and stop, get a real life, and by my father and my stepmother, and we were just talking before we started about our own lives, and it gives me a giant heart for creative people because we don't have a pattern that's recognizable. We're inventing things that have never existed, and there aren't rail lines into them. If you're a dentist or a doctor or a bank account, everything runs on tracks and it all makes sense. Well, if I imagine something and I go pursue it, I'm pursuing something that's a dream and then trying to make it real. And those people don't understand us. No. Because they think we're going to fail, and so that with the best will in the world, they're trying to talk us out of it, because it looks like that they're doing us a favor, stopping us from getting into places where we're going to destroy our future and never have a job, and one of the things I'm very cautious about is never getting cynical. I think that it's easy to get cynical if you're creative and people put you down for your ideas, it's dangerous to get cynical, because then you don't keep dreaming. And so one of the things that you've got to try and do is to associate with other people who are dreamers too, but rational dreamers. Not people that are so airy-fairy it doesn't make sense, but practical airy-fairy.
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Yeah. And our creative entrepreneurship means that our job is not just to create something, but also to help build a bridge back to the people that don't understand it yet, because it's too new for them, so that you can help them understand it. Not get angry that they don't understand it, but try and explain it in terms of their benefits and why it works for them. And that's part of the task of people that are creating things, is to also use as much energy and creativity selling the things, explaining the things, not putting people down, but recruiting them from their own needs and their own goals and their own intelligence to be part of what you've managed to imagine, and help get you to the goals, because they start to see their benefits in doing that.
Absolutely. Pen, you've worked across film, television, writing, and now fine art photography. So looking back, what do you believe has been the common thread running through all of your creative work?
Well, self-doubt. I think that creative people constantly unsure about what they're doing, and they need people to encourage them. So 2 or 3 times in my life, like my school teacher, my English school teacher, gave me the lead in the school play, gave me two slots in the school magazine for articles I'd written, and I won the school photography prize. And that while I was living in a home life which was very destructive, and my stepmother was taking drugs and drinking alcohol and screaming at people and trying to kill my brother by starving him to death, which is true. This man's sanity and he said, "You've been hiding your light under a bushel." I had no idea what that meant, but it seemed very important. And so sometimes the luck of being around people that reinforce you, but not giving up on your dreams and realizing that imperfection is normal. I think that's a really important part of it. I'm sure when you started off trying to do your podcast, you tried this way, you tried that way, and you tried that way. And what it came to me was that passion, which we're not taught. We're almost taught that passion is selfish. That wanting to do something because you love it so much, it is selfish, and it's not. It's actually trying to get to your true instincts of who you are. And if we look at humans as being each one a magical collection of DNA and zeitgeist and epigenetics and the time we live in and our family environment, we're each instruments, but we don't know what we are. And so we could be a drum or a piccolo or a violin, and sometimes we just don't find that. And also people look at you and they think you should be a piccolo, but you're actually a violin, And so one of the key things is passion, because your nature and the emotional texture of your life leads you to want to explore. And those instincts, one of the things I say frequently, I say, ignore everything I say that goes against your instincts. They're sacred. If I help you by reinforcing something, that's brilliant. But if I say something that doesn't reinforce something, I'm not right.
No.
I'm just trying to probe to give you support. But if you're a piccolo and I'm a drum and I'm trying to teach you how to bang, it ain't going to help you. And it doesn't mean you're wrong.
No. And I love, like, when you shared that story then, I didn't even flinch when you mentioned about the violent background and what happened at school with a teacher, because it's just my story as well. So I had all of this violence going on in my house because my dad was an alcoholic, and he used to, beat my mum in front of us, and there were awful violent things with neighbours and out in the street. But parallel to that, I had this dream. I loved singing. I was singing since I was 5, and I used to gather audiences in the playground from the age of 5. I don't know how I knew all the words to the songs at that age, but I did. And then later it was a drama teacher and the music teacher who pulled me under their wings. I was given leading roles in a musical. I ended up traveling to Russia. It was like out of this world. Wow. 1983, when it was behind the Iron Curtain.
Yep, right.
And so, and then my drama teacher had the BBC in because they were doing this play for today called 3 Minute Heroes. I don't know if you remember the play for today.
I think I was gone by then.
Well, yeah. And because they were doing it in the school, they were talking to her about this script for a musical that they had, and it was called The Little Match Girl. And she said, "Oh, I know just the girl who can play it." And so I played it. We went to Russia, and a year later, they remembered me because they came to watch it, and they offered me to audition for the part of Agnes Tellwright in a series called Anna of the Five Towns. And then I ended up starring in radio plays, in theatre productions. Just this dream just unfolded just because of this one drama teacher who believed in me. My family didn't believe in me. They didn't even understand what I was doing. But I really felt that in having listened to your story before as well. That how so great lucky. It is that if we can share these experiences with other children that live like that and that don't realize that they can still go for their dreams.
Well, one of the things I did when I worked for an educational film company in Canada that was making very boring educational films, which I thought were, it was an insult to the intelligence of young people. And one of the very first things when my partner and I started our film companies, we got a grant to make films with children from the ages of 11 to 15 selling life as if it was a commercial product. And we asked each kid to write a script because we didn't think a commercial length film would overwhelm a kid. And each of them created their own story. One wrote a script about a man selling a tank like a used car and telling people how we could blow people up, and then all the war statements were sort of hidden behind it. Another one wrote a script about chess pieces on the board, all bickering and annoyed how every move was annoying them until they were put on the box, and they realized things weren't so bad. And these little kids. What I wanted to do was to show a kind of shot across the bow of the education world. Look at the imagination of these children that you're teaching. These are treasured things that you're dealing with, and the opportunities that might be in them that you don't know that you could help. So that actually ended up getting nominated for an Oscar, and
Wow.
and again, that was one of those whims. What we made this film passionately with an arts grant. And we held this premiere and hoped that the press would come, and no press turned up at the premiere. We had a great premiere. The kids were happy. We ran it twice. All their folks were there. And one of them said, "Why don't you get us an Oscar?" And I go, "Yeah, sure, right." And then I'm in my bathtub and I'm going, what an ass I was. And this is the eureka moment, I'm going, I should have at least looked into it. So the next morning I got up, phoned the Academy, which is where you get the Oscars, and I had no idea anything about them. It was like phoning the Vatican and asking, how do you visit the Pope? It's like, no idea. And they said, well, you have to run a movie in a theater, paying theater with audiences for a week in Los Angeles. And I'm going, well, how am I going to do that? I'm living in Toronto. I don't know. So I phoned up a local theater owner and thought, well, maybe he could give me some insights. And he said, nah, no one's going to help you. They don't know who you are. It's a waste of time. Don't even bother. And almost gave in. And then at that time our films were selling to schools and libraries, and we had a distributor in Canada who was a sweetheart. And I phoned him up and said, do you know any of the people that are making films in California that might advise us how we could get a theater? And he said, not really. My guys, I don't think, the only people I know in Los Angeles is my buddy, and his dad runs a limo company. And he goes, I'll give him a call. And he phoned me back 5 minutes later, and he said, you have a movie theater. As long as it's not pornography, they're bringing a projector in, and they're going to run your movie in this movie theater because it's right next door to the limo company, and the limo company takes their deliveries for them every day, and they owe them big favors. And that's the magic of what might happen. You don't know until you just keep pushing. And they ran it in their theater for a week, it qualified, and we were one of 3 movies that were nominated for an Oscar that year in the shorts category. And that changed our lives because we suddenly were. The other thing that it sounds really selfish, but you got to promote yourself. People tell you not to be bombastic and pushy, and but if you don't push yourself, you will not get to the opportunities that are there. So I had watched another Canadian get nominated for an Oscar, and he didn't promote the fact he was nominated. He went to the Oscars to see if he'd win, but he didn't, and no one knew. And so I decided we would promote the fact that we've been nominated, and these 9 kids had all made these wonderful little short films that were philosophically uplifting. And we managed to get the Canadian government supporting us. We got the Academy to give tickets to all 9 children with chaperones, which they never do. And we had a TV crew fly with us. And when we lost the Oscar, we were on the front page of every newspaper and on the news in every news in Canada. And that put us on the map.
That's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that, Pen. Pen, you famously continued with Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, despite several studios telling you it wasn't commercially viable. What gave you the conviction to trust that vision?
Well, again, it's another one of those situations where I was about to give up, and I was one of the wonders of my life was that my wife and I had a child together, and it was an emergency cesarean, and my son was born, and I looked at the world that we were making movies and the world that my son was going to grow up in, and I'd worked with Sylvester Stallone, and I watched Schwarzenegger making movies like Commando, where mowing down human beings was considered to be success, and putting your foot on a corpse with a smoking gun, and you're a big hero. And I'm looking how much love and energy it takes to raise a child, and I'm perplexed because philosophically everything we did was about underdogs and uplift and trying to find ways of making life better for people. And I had this perspective that what if I made something that used the Robin Hood form, which as a form I loved, and I loved the Errol Flynn movie, and made a story about an underdog, a guy who was a spoiled brat, a real obnoxious Baron's son, who burned Maid Marian's hair when he was a kid, who chased away his own half-brother who was, a bastard child, and who, when his dad said, stay here, don't go, try and force other men to your religion, took off anyway because it was an adventure. And when his dad dies, he ends up feeling so angry at himself that he's trying to use other people to get revenge as opposed to doing something useful. And the other thing that I had was this epiphany of putting an Arab, a Muslim, side by side with a Christian in a story, because I was so tired of seeing people denigrating so much of humanity and calling them all terrorists. And when the Arab history was that they were probably more civilized than the English back in the time when Robin Hood was around.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so I wanted, and my goal was to write a story where Robin learns the error of his ways, where he sees that he's really an obnoxious guy and learns to let go of that and learns to be willing to die for the future of his peasants' children. And I thought, steal from the rich, to give to the poor, but that was a bigger metaphor, which is putting yourself on the line for others, which is altruistic heroism. So I pitched that story at 3 studios, and they all said, yeah, that's a nice story, but no one wants men with swords, they want people with guns, forget it. And our assistant, who was typing up letters for us and things, said, I think it's a fabulous story. If you want to start writing it, I'll do my best to support you. And because of that person saying that, he literally blew on the embers of my idea and gave me enough wind behind my sails to start trying to write it. I started writing it on spec, which means you don't get paid. And when we're creating things, we frequently don't know the value of what we're creating. Our brain can't register critically at the same time as it registers creatively. And one of the great things as I've learned is how to let go and create what I call dangerously, which is to let go of all the rules, to let go of the things that you think you're supposed to do in order to fit the formulas, because those movies or those stories or those things are boring because everybody's already seen them. And when I say write dangerously or create dangerously, it means go to the end of your ability to tolerate being different. And what you're also discovering is your voice. You're discovering things you didn't know were in you until you push to reveal them, because no teaching, ever got you there. So when I wrote my Robin Hood script and then gave it to my partner John to tweak and do things on it, we thought I was just fulfilling a need not to fail at writing an idea, because I've been talked out of writing other things by my partners which didn't seem to be commercial. And we got to a point where it was Christmas, and suddenly there's another Robin Hood. It's going to be made by the guy that did Die Hard, and the studio at Fox is already going to make it. And it seemed like it was a waste of time. And my partner John didn't want to finish tweaking the script, and I said, no, I can't learn to fail. I've already given up on other things. I cannot teach myself that giving up is acceptable, because it had passion in. I wanted to say those things, whether they, even if they only ended up in a script, I wanted to say things about the future. Also, when I was writing it, I started crying and wrote a birth scene. And it was an emergency cesarean where Morgan Freeman's Arab character helps the chief woodman's wife give birth using a cesarean to a child that would have died otherwise. And I thought, you're not supposed to do this in adventure movies, right? These, birth scenes. And it was the first scene that the director didn't want to put in the movie. And And yet I felt that it was a magical thing because here I was putting the child on the screen that Robin Hood's willing to fight for and die for so he has a future. And we ended up that suddenly our script was finished, and we put it in the market, and we had 3 studios bidding on it. And so we gone from no one wanting it, and then suddenly there's 2 more Robin Hoods, and we're going, what the heck? And it became like a horse race. And a lady, and this is where these things are lucky, a lady who had been Kevin Costner's agent read the script and absolutely loved it. And she had lost Kevin Costner to CAA. She no longer represented him. She gave him the script anyway.
Oh, wow.
And said, you should do this. And this was right after Dances with Wolves. And he read it and liked it. And it was a matter of finding the right calibration, the right director for it. And we ended up making the movie in a horse race and managed to beat the other Robin Hoods out. Now, all along that way, there was all kinds of wonderful support and also lots of doubt. Lots of people saying, well, this is a waste of time. Luckily, the company that we sold the script to was run by a very eccentric, I call him a mogul, because he was sort of like putting his own money up to try and help get the movie made. And he was willing to fly my partner, John, to England to start getting studios, to start hiring crews, even though we didn't close the deal on Kevin Costner yet, which was very courageous.
That's a huge level of trust and faith.
Yeah, and you know, you keep reading about people that do these things, that take on impossible odds and try and challenge themselves, and it's not comfortable.
No.
You know, sometimes, and I say that the passion has to equal the pain of the progress. In other words, if you really yearn to tell this story, you really yearn to create this thing or create a new company that does things that service people in a way that you passionately believe in it, that is vital, because that passion, and better even if it's charitable, if it's altruistic, immunizes you from stress. It makes you go out and do things that you would never do on a normal thing that you know, if you write a script and it's just a simulacrum of a, people say horror movies sell, so I'm going to write a horror movie. But you don't love them. I mean, horror movies have their own oeuvre, they have their own taste, and they have their own strange, dark, noir thoughts in them. But if you write one and you don't like it, it's a nothing script. Whereas if you write something, and I wrote a script called Moll Flanders, which was because I'd had a daughter, I think, and it was about a flawed woman revealing her story to her child that she'd been separated from, and realizing that the child will love her anyway with all the flaws and mistakes she made in her life. And that was the purpose of the story, was to say women can be fragile and make mistakes, but still worthy of unstoppable love. And again, I wrote that on spec, but I didn't even tell my partners I was writing it. But I wrote it in secret because I didn't want them trying to talk me out of it. What are you doing writing a woman's story? What are you, silly thing? You don't put. No one's ever going to buy that, And only my assistant gave me support. She had written a thesis on sheroes when she was at college, and she and I came up with the last lines of a movie, which was, "What say you, child, now that you've heard your mother's story?" And the reason I came up with that was I'd heard an orphans and foundlings home being discussed on public radio in America that was in England, that had turned into a museum and supposedly had letters that women had left with the babies they abandoned on the doorstep. And I wondered what a woman would say to a child she might never see again. And this ending was, "What say you, child, now you've heard your mother's story?" And a little waif who's 5 years old wearing rags, who's been brought out of an orphanage to stand in front of this very wealthy looking woman, says, "You could throw me out without a crust to eat, or if I deny that woman is worthy of my love." And then the woman says, "Prepare yourself, child, for I am that woman, I am your mother." And I was in tears, and I knew, and that was all I had.
But you knew because of how you felt.
Write that story.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which leads to my next question, really, because this is what I feel it's all about, and we're always talking about this sort of thing on this podcast. Have there been moments in your career where intuition led you somewhere logic couldn't fully justify at the time? And I don't know about you, but most of the things that I've done in the last few years have all been led by my intuition. None of it has been logical, which is rather bizarre to a lot of people.
And you know, and I don't go woo woo, but I do
No.
believe that surrendering to your unconscious resource, you know, we're like this little rowboat on the top of our consciousness, and underneath this entire lifespan of what we've lived, and all the epigenetics and genetics and all those things are in us, and they come out once in a while as muses. And I think storytelling, and I think the way that the stories, we're naturally storytellers. We're a creature that was raised in tiny little tribes that needed to tell stories in order to create a solid foundation where people could exchange each other's needs, trading, win-win, so that each of us could get our children into the future. And I believe human beings selected for morality because immorality would create a diffracted tribe and they wouldn't get to bring their children into the future. So we bred for morality. Now we have our outliers, we have our Hitlers, and we have our, you know, people that are thieves and things, but majority of people want to stop that. And so intuition, I believe, is also tied to these streams of things that are teaching the tribe stories. They're teaching, whether it's, we call them religions, parables, or legends, you know, these things are to help pull humanity together so that we do good things. The unfortunate thing is that we can be othered. You know, we can make people look at other people and tell them they're bad, we're good, and that we should then punish them. And that we need to see the humanity in everybody, which is why my, rather than to put a Muslim and a Christian together, we're all the same. We're all trying to get into the future. But the thing about instincts is if you can find the trust that there are things in you that are naturally going to tell stories, that are naturally going to make discoveries. We're the most extraordinary animal, because if you look at us, you know, 200,000 years ago, there was only a few 100,000 of our creature. And the ones that succeeded were the problem solvers. You know, we're bred from the people that lived long enough by finding ways to survive, to have children. And we're incredible problem solvers, but we never know it because we don't really challenge ourselves to discover what we could solve. So that trusting instincts, because we're not taught it. The school doesn't tell you, hey, we're going to do a class on instincts now. You know, it says, no, we're going to do a class on memorizing mathematic tables in case all of the you know, the mathematical devices all disappear at once. We're going to, you know, which is no help at all. So my joy, you know, your question is, I learned to stop trying to write what others wanted or told me was right, and started writing what I called life scripts, which is the scripts that wanted to come out of me. And even though I only have 4 lines of Moll Flanders, that was the writing experience, because once I'd set fire to it, it was sensual and exciting, and it was just pouring out of me from places that I didn't know existed in me. And it's the same with my photography. I did my best because I love photography. I have behind me is all these old cameras, you know, from the Victorian era, and I'm excited by the people that made them, the imaginations of the people that made them, so that people like me could go and create. And I kept trying to get photography right, and I took some really pretty good pictures, but they look like everybody else's pictures. You know, you take a sunset, and it looks like a lovely sunset, or a road with a woman with a red umbrella, and you know, it's same. And watching my daughter, and I gave up my photography, although I loved shooting nature, and I loved, and my daughter picked up my cameras, and she started using them, and no one taught her anything. And she's 14, and I'm looking at her photos, and they're all weird because she's focusing in strange places. The compositions, the things she chooses to photograph are odd and different. And I'm looking at them, and they're poetic and mystical because they don't look like anything I've ever seen. And there's music to them in the way that the eye embraces them and dances around them. And I thought, I've been doing things wrong here. And then I got to read a website that I loved, which was always a very positive, creative website. And one of the articles was, why are you holding the camera still when you take a photo? Well, I've been told to. it's like shooting a gun. You're supposed to breathe in and hold it steady and get that everything rock solid. And I decided that I would try and play with my camera sometime and move the camera and see what happened. And I was out on a tourist trip on a boat on the Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia, which is this vast lake with alligators in it. And the water is very dark because it's full of particulates, and it's like a giant mirror, and it's undulating, and light is bouncing off it. And I'm on this little tourist boat that's got a little tiny outboard motor, and I'm right at the very front, and I'm watching the light and the mirroring and the way that it's. And I take my camera, and making sure no one's watching, and I got this little camera that's got really good photos, but and it's got the whole back of the camera is the viewfinder, and I lean over the side of the boat and I do this. And then I look at the result because you can see it on a digital camera right away. And I'm like, nothing I've ever seen, but it looked cool.
Wow.
And I'm going, well, this is stupid or it's brilliant. I don't know what it is. And that was about 16 or 17 years ago. And I just started letting go and forcing myself to move the camera, to take long exposures, to blow out the highlights so that I'm trying to take pictures I've never seen before. And that feels stupid. And there's this little nagging voice in your head all the time trying to help you. Don't waste your time doing that. People are going to laugh at you for doing that because it's designed in to be a thing to prevent us from walking into caves and getting eaten by bears. It's like, and if you listen to it, you'll not try and create. So you have to shut that up for a while. And I've heard of people actually talking to it and saying, hey, give us a break. Go take a break. Leave me alone. And apparently it will. I've also heard of people trying to make it talk like Donald Duck, so you laughed when you heard it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm out there letting go of everything I've ever learned about photography, but still having the whole understanding of photography because I know it extremely well. But suddenly I'm shooting waves, which I love. I grew up around the Solent. My license plate number here is Solent, so because it's easy to remember. But it also, it celebrates that thing of living in the New Forest, and what I'm by experimenting and shooting and zooming while I'm photographing, and then what I learned was look at the photos you take even though you don't know what they are. And I started to realize that I'm creating images that I've never seen before, and I have to allow them to actually be discovered by my brain, that they're aesthetic. And one of the big steps, Katie, was realizing that stop doing photography and start doing art. Start thinking Jackson Pollock, start thinking Monet, Turner, start thinking Van Gogh. All of those people changed the way that their art was. And people didn't understand it, but they had their own journey to take people to a new place where the art could go. And I'm not saying I'm like that, I'm saying I admire those people. And what I realized was that if you let go of what photography is supposed to be and start to realize that it can be abstract art, it can be Jackson Pollock-like art, it can be any and Monet-like art where there's just colors and shapes and forms that are joyous. And so I've slowly over the years started creating a kind of a personal language and learning that I just got to keep being open and making mistakes and letting things, because when we photograph, the secret of photography is take 100 pictures, find one good one and look good, know. And that's what all the good photographers do. They don't just do one photograph and get it right. So keep taking images until you find the ones and the bizarre and wonderful thing is when you find one and it feels right, I choke up. I literally get emotional and I realize that one's magic.
There's so much in that. It's so relative to the rest of creativity as well, isn't it? Writing, poetry. I write poetry. And I don't write poetry in the way that you're supposed to sit and write poetry. It literally flows through me in an instant. I have to go and grab a pen. So it's like a stream of consciousness that comes in. And I ended up creating a solo poetry book with them all. And when I look back at them, it was me healing out loud through poetry. But I didn't plan it. I didn't sit down and consciously write it. I just let it flow. I shared it everywhere on social media when it came through, because it always felt like there were messages in there for other people as well.
Yes.
Instead of
And
letting
I
that
think
inner
that
critic,
touches.
instead of letting the inner
Yeah.
critic say, "Oh no, that's not good enough," don't.
Yeah, that critic, and it's a reason why we mustn't hang around with people that are obnoxious druggies or pushy early on. Eventually, they become our audience, and we need to share our early work with what I call story midwives, people that are helping you, who've got a soul, who are trying to help you push through the pain of giving birth and not telling you what sex the child should be. The second thing you triggered in me, Katie, was that. When I was making the movie Moll Flanders, I've been lucky enough to get Robin Wright and Morgan Freeman to star in it, and John Lynch. And I'm on the set, and my partner John says, "How come none of your characters have mothers?" And I go, "Oh, Robin Hood, no mother." My Moll Flanders is a story of a woman who's a daughter of a woman who is hung the moment she's born, because in England they would keep you alive if you can get pregnant by the guards for 9 months until you gave birth, and then they'd hang you. And she loses her own daughter, and she's reconciled at the end. And almost all my stories were people with no mothers. And when I let go, I wasn't actually sensorily aware that I was working through my own life process with these stories. And I believe stories can be healing, and each of us can be a different perspective of what life can be. And I'd had the privilege of working with Marshall McLuhan, who was a giant of guru of communications in the 60s and 70s. And he said, watch an audience watching a movie, and you'll see in the dark they're in a trance. And they're moving their features microscopically with the expressions on the characters' faces. And apparently a baby mimics the mouth movements of the people around it from the time it's born. And we have these things called mirror neurons, which fire off when we watch someone do an athletic, when we're watching the FIFA games and we're seeing people kick. We're out there in our head having the same muscle movements in our head, but we're not actually doing it. And stories that cause us to physiologically respond through our mirror neurons and these mimicking things are teaching us how to feel about others who are learning as they progress. And we're changing and adapting ourselves because of those stories, and learning things that we will bring to our own lives and making choices. So the front of our head, we're watching Robin Hood. At the back of our head, we're deciding, no, I wouldn't burn Marion's hair. That would be, no, I would actually stand up and help those people. We're making emotional choices about who we are and what we are, because we're learning from the others around us.
I love that. And I loved when you shared about the baby, because I just had a new grandchild about 8 weeks
Congrats.
ago.
Yeah.
And this one, I got to be in the labour room. I got to be the person to take the first photographs. And I've had quite a close relationship with her because she's had colic. So I've been there to help.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've been there to help my daughter a lot, to get my daughter to go back to bed and get some sleep. But I've had so much interaction with her. It feels so different to my own 3 children as well. And what I'm totally recognising is the way we mirror each other constantly.
Yes.
And I was thinking about this yesterday, how powerful it is when you start really looking at babies. We can learn a lot from babies if we're not too busy being stressed about them.
One of the, I'm getting some sleep. One of the gorgeous things I discovered was that if you show a 5-month-old a little sort of like parable, you get some puppets, and you get it to watch a puppet helping another puppet go up a hill. And then you show it another puppet that's trying to push it down the hill. The kid wants to play with the helper puppet.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is magical. That means morality is part of who we are. It's inbred. And when we watch shows like Law and Order or something, what we're really watching is there's somebody who gets out of line and they tear the fabric of society, and all the worker bees come in, stop them from doing it, try and find a way of dealing with that person so that they put them in prison, or they try and re-educate them, and they sew up society to make it so whole again. And that story gets told over and over and over and over again. And it's because it's so valuable to keep society healthy.
Thank you for sharing that. When someone experiences your photography pen, what do you hope they walk away feeling?
That's a great question. And to begin with, I was constantly wanted to explain how I made the images because I was sort of distancing myself from it. When I shook the camera, the trees looked like they're exploding with joy, and so I wanted to explain. I did this with a longer shutter speed. And then I realized, no, stop this. Stop trying to justify it. Let go, and realize that what I really want is to cast a spell for the viewer. And I go right back to when I was a little child. I really want that if it's possible, someone looks at one of my images and feels things about their lives, about nature, about existence. The fact that we've been on this planet for 4.5 billion years, when I'm photographing waves, we came out of those waves. And if I can help you be in touch with something that's primal, I've done something great. If I make an image of a tree and that tree feels like it's exploding with life, and we realize that trees are the reason we breathe, and what the human brain is a phenomenal thing, but it can't keep all the information we need in order to survive. So we don't see the world we live in because it becomes so familiar that we just dispense with it. So you drive home, you don't see the trees around you because you're driving on autopilot, because we can't stay alert all the time. And so I'm hoping that I find something in an image that helps people to re-see the world they live in a way that's valuable to them, in a way that's emotional to their inner journey and their perspectives. And I'm so lucky because I seem to be doing that for a lot of people. And it kind of blows my mind because I go from making images that I never thought were particularly special and being very frustrated to making images now that blow my mind. And I go, how the heck did I do that? And it looks so cool. And and I don't want to be arrogant because I don't want I have this optimism, which I think you do as well. I have the sense that there's going to be things in my future that are wonderful. I don't know what they are yet. And I want to go push forward to see what else I can discover that I don't know what it will be yet.
Yeah.
And I feel I'm very lucky. And I don't run away from the fact that I've had depressions and I get stressed and but I also trying to give back helps. They say that charitable acts and sexual addiction, gambling, alcoholism, all stimulate the same things. And of the choices, I'd rather do charitable acts.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And so what's in us as creatures, this idea that maybe I can make your life a little better, make it more fun, make it more emotionally satisfying, give you reassurance to overcome your own self-doubt, your own imposter syndrome. If I can reinforce people to realize that I had no idea where I would get to be in my life. I fled England at 19 thinking I was a washed up failure. And I'd done a couple of things, photographed the Rolling Stones and sold a few photos. But I was sure I was just a coward and getting out. And then found a culture where young people were making movies and people were sharing their cameras. And suddenly I was observing other young people doing things that 15-year-olds making movies. And I'm going, wow, I'm 19. And suddenly I felt young again. And that never dreamed I would be in Hollywood, never dreamed I'd write a movie like Robin Hood. And it was the baby steps, and it was never quitting on my soul, and it was being able to cope with the stresses and trying to find ways that ameliorated stress, because there was a time in my 20s where I was so freaking stressed. I had founded a large house, a hippie commune almost, for filmmakers, and I took on all the responsibility of the financing and then rented out rooms to people. My wife-to-be moved in with me. I quit the job at the company I was at and started the company with my partner, and I'd done all those stresses all at the same time.
Wow.
And I went into, the stress of the bands around your head, and you're feeling panicky, and then I read a book that was, because I tried taking Valium and hated it. I thought, this is worse. I'm now foggy and feeling stressed. It was worse to me.
Yeah.
And I found this book that just said, these are imaginary bears. The things that you're scared of aren't happening. They're your body trying to reach out and figure out how to protect you. And they say, well, what if that happens? What if this happens? And when you adrenalize to those things, you create this feedback loop. And that's what was happening. It was a practical, rational emotional therapy, it was called. And when I realized that this is just what our bodies do, and that if you say to it, come on, scare me, give me a good one, I'm gonna, or if you come up with something ridiculous, if you scare me, I'm gonna take off all my clothes and run around the room. If you can start laughing while the scares are coming at you,
Yeah.
and fool the thing into letting you go, it takes a while, but you can actually get through this stuff. And so welcoming in the things that scare you, sit in a comfortable place and saying, okay, I'm ready for you, do your worst, because it's not there. You actually can't get stressed when you're doing something, because the stress only fits into those places where you don't have your brain occupied.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. There's so much that's going to benefit our listeners from this. But if you could leave them with one message about creativity, intuition,
Right.
and living fully expressed, what would it be?
I have more things I've failed at than I've succeeded. I have more scripts that I didn't get made that I'm annoyed at myself for not fighting for. I did learn salesmanship somewhere along the line, and there was one time when I was trying to sell my Mal Flanders movie, and I went to meet the head of a studio, Paramount, sorry, not at MGM, and I was going to beg him to read my script, and he'd already read it, and he said, when Mal started getting drunk, I thought she was such a bitch, no one would like the movie. And I thought, oh, this is never going to work. And then I realized that my job was to listen sincerely, to understand what he's telling me, and then confess to not necessarily accomplishing his goals yet. And I said, yeah, I understand how you could feel. That wasn't my intention. I wanted you to see her as vulnerable. And when she actually stops being an alcoholic, I wanted you to cheer for her overcoming her self-doubt and becoming a hero and finding her own child and reconciling. And I realized that if we have the tools to sell our work, if we have the courage to sell things we believe in, and I could only do that because I was so passionate about this movie, because I'm shy. I don't like putting myself on the line.
Yeah.
But I kept asking this guy, what else don't you like? Because a course on salesmanship had taught me that you have to eliminate the objections in a sincere way, so your buyer knows that you're listening, and find solutions that work for them. And once you've done that, you've built trust with them. You've found what the problems are that stop you from getting to your goals. And if you're lucky, things work out. So I rewrote my script in 3 days, clarifying things that I hadn't cleared up, changing things so that they were more approachable by that particular studio head. And I was in a meeting at MGM, and he walked by the office, and he said, my office after this. And it was like when the principal wanted to cane me. And he said, that's one of the best scripts I've ever read in my life. Now, my partners thought I was nuts giving it back to him after I'd been thoroughly rejected. And I'll give you $10 million, and we'll make it with 2 stars. And we ended up making it. So when people say to me, what's your biggest mistake? I say, my errors of omission. When I when I thought it was impolite to push a little, or when I didn't put myself out and go and take on a challenge that had frightened me. And so, and again, that's why I don't want people to look at me as a success. I want people to look at me that someone that keeps stumbling forward, and keeps finding excitement by talking to people like you. And I figure, well, if you're nuts and I'm nuts, then I'm not alone. So, the biggest thing is to remember that there are other people like you, and that you will discover things you never dreamed you're capable of. And, that they're in you to be discovered. And everything you do is creative, even if it doesn't sell right away, or if isn't lost. It's as long as you're working towards that voice, that instinct, that intuition, you're training it and strengthening its muscles. So have faith in yourself that you can go forward. Don't put deadlines on yourself. We don't know how we work. It's not like you should say, well, by in 2 months, if I don't do this, I'm screwed. You don't know. But I've also found that sometimes putting targets on could force me to do things in a very short period of time I didn't know I was capable of it.
Yeah.
One of the things on my website, I have a website which is pendenshamphotography.com, is there's a section called books, and there's a free book of my photography because I want to share it, but there's also a book I wrote which is a short book which is called A Creative Person's Success Manual, and
Brilliant.
you can download it from there. And I wrote that passionately because my son had sent me an email on a Sunday night saying, and he's a writer, and he had the writer's blues, and we seemed to take turns cheering each other up and cheering each other on, and because we understand we're story midwives to each other. And I knew I had to write him a letter. I was on the treadmill and I got to write him a letter by 6 o'clock that makes being creative normal, makes being creative okay, and makes making mistakes okay. And I started writing that letter and sent it to him, but then I couldn't stop writing for 4 or 5 days, and ended up with this mini book, which I forced my book publishers to give away. I said, this is for out-of-the-box thinkers. Give it away because you're contributing to the community of creativity. And I've been continuing to give it away because I think that the people like us need to support each other.
That's so beautiful, Pen. Thank you for sharing that. And we will put the links in the show notes so that everybody can find them as well. Thank you for today. I've loved every second.
Thank you. Well, soulmate, Kit. Yeah, you bully me and I come up and I bounce up again, and I think, and we're lucky because a lot of people, you could get depressed and it could just hold you back, and you did great things. So congratulations.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into the Soulful Valley Podcast. If today's episode resonated with your soul, share it with someone who needs it and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts to help others discover our sacred space. Want to go deeper? Check out the show notes where you can find links to all our opportunities and communities and step into your power as an author or poet in one of our next best-selling books. The next chapter of your soul-led journey starts now. Listen to all of our episodes here. Come on over and check out our new podcast, She Invests Intuitively. Until next time, keep evolving on purpose.
So ask yourself, is this for me? Give yourself some boundaries. Learn to trust your